First off, I would like to say that this isn't perfect. I tried my best, but I don't have very much experience with stop motion, nor do I have an incredible editing app, but the one I have works just fine. I hope you all enjoy A Tale Dark and Grim, Chapter 1, Lego Edition. Once upon a time. Make sure there aren't any little kids around. Unlike most fairy tales, this is a Grimm fairy tale, and they get dark and sometimes pretty gruesome. Anyway, once upon a time, there was an old king who laid on his deathbed. He asked his most faithful servant, Johann, to be faithful to the next king, his own son. The servant agreed. Then the king asked that his son would be shown the castle, all of the halls and doorways and all of it, all except for one door, for the old king feared that his son would fall in love with the portrait and it would cost him his life, because the portrait had a princess who was cursed and all of her husbands died. Johann promised, and the king died peacefully. Soon the son was made king, and Johann explained his role as the most faithful servant. He explained that he would understand him always, and he would always be there for the king, to back him up, hold him up, keep him steady. Then Johann showed the king the castle, all of the hallways, doorways, rooms, cabinets. One day, the king asked about the forbidden door, and Johann refused to show him. So the king sat on the floor and had a temper tantrum until Johann gave up and let him in. Then Johann tried to block the door, but the king pushed past him and saw the portrait of the princess, and then fainted. The king decided that he wanted to marry the princess, so Johann came up with a plan to disguise themselves as gold merchants and take her home to the king's castle. For if she knew that the king wanted to marry her, she probably would have disagreed, not wanting to risk another husband's life. When they arrived on the gold princess's land, Johann went to look for the princess. When he found her, he took out some gold and led the princess to the boat, where the king waited. There, he showed her lots of gold as the boat slowly sailed away, taking the princess. When the princess realized this, she was scared, for merchants had taken her, but the king revealed himself and asked her to be his queen. She said yes, and they sailed toward the kingdom. While sailing, Johann discovered 3 crows that knew the future. He eavesdropped and discovered that there was a horse that would kill the king unless it was killed first. But if anyone said something about why they had killed the horse, they would be turned to stone up to their waist. If that wasn't enough, there would be a bridal gown that would burn the princess unless it was burned first. But if someone explained why they had burned it, they would be turned to stone up to their heart. Just to top it off, if that didn't kill them, the queen would faint while dancing, and unless someone drinks the blood from her lips, she will die. But if someone explains why they did it, they will turn to stone from their shoulders to their head. While Johann heard this, he was very worried. When the group came to land, a horse appeared, but before the king could ride it, Johann killed it, and then said nothing about it. When they arrived at the castle, a beautiful bridal gown was ready, but before the queen could put it on, Johann set fire to it, and then said nothing. Soon the king and queen were married, and they danced. While they were dancing, the queen fainted. Johann appeared, and he leaned over and drank blood from her lips, and she was revived. But the king put Johann in prison because he misunderstood Johann's intentions and sentenced him to be executed. At Johann's execution, he asked if he would say a few things. The king obliged, and Johann explained the horse, and he started to turn to stone. Then he explained the gown, and he turned a stone up to his heart. Then he explained why he had leaned over the queen, and he was a stone statue. The king and queen felt terrible. So they moved Johann to their bedroom, where every morning they were reminded of how they misunderstood Johann. Years passed, and the queen had twins, Hansel and Gretel, who grew up quickly and played happily. One day, while the king was mourning, Johann's statue spoke to the king and told him that if he cut off the heads of his children, then Johann would come back to life. The king did this, and Johann came back to life. Johann then restored the children because of the king's faith. The king decided it would be better to hide the children and Johann before the queen came back. Once the queen returned, the king explained everything, and then revealed the children and Johann. And then they lived happily ever after together. Kind of. The end. Maybe? Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed this.